Hey there, Wastelanders, and welcome back to War Games News Radio for another episode of Better Know a Faction, a series where I break down the different faction special rules and units for Fallout Wasteland Warfare. In this episode, I'm going to cover the faction which I've probably had the most requests for to date, and that's the Institute. Operating from deep underneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the Institute have been working for centuries developing their synthetic humans to do their bidding. They've also been abducting Wastelanders from the Commonwealth to further their scientific experiments, giving them a less than spotless reputation above ground. On the tabletop, the Institute is a diverse faction which can work well as either a small list of heavy-hitting elite units or in a giant swarm of synths used to overwhelm your opponent. And while the Institute doesn't have a faction special rule to speak of, there are a lot of special rules which pertain specifically to synths, and it's a good idea to get to know some of those rules before you double down on building an Institute force. Synths cannot be heroic, and they also can't equip any perks. They can't use food, alcohol, or chem items, and they also can't use clothing, armor, or power armor. Synths can't use robot items unless it's an item which happens to remove damage from a robot, and they're also immune to poison and radiation. Cards which state that they affect robots also affect synths, so this includes pulse grenades and robot repair kits. Now keep in mind that these rules only apply to Gen 1 and Gen 2 synths, which have the synth unit icon on their card. However, any advanced Gen 3s, specifically Courser units, aren't impacted by these synth special rules because they aren't considered synths in the same way as the earlier models are, mainly because they're pretty much indistinguishable from a flesh and blood human. Now that we have a better understanding of how the synth special rules come into play, let's take a look at the different units available in the Institute faction. First up is the most basic unit in the entire faction, the Gen 1 Synth. There are actually two versions of this unit, the Standard Gen 1 and the Battered Gen 1. The Battered Gen 1 isn't particularly good at anything, but they are crazy affordable. At just 23 caps, you get what you pay for with only 4 hit points and 1 physical and 1 energy armor. They only hit on 3s in combat, which only gives them a 35% base chance to hit with melee, ranged, and thrown weapons. They do have a couple objective-based skills, searching on a perception of 4 and hacking with their low intelligence of 2, but Battered Gen 1s are easily the faction's least talented objective runner. Now, the Standard Gen 1 might be a superior unit, but they're still very basic. They're more expensive at 32 caps, and they do get a bump to their agility over the Battered Gen 1 synth, giving them a 4 to hit with ranged weapons, and they also get 1 extra hit point compared to the battered version. On the bright side, both the Battered and Gen 1 synths are immune to radiation, and they're also immune to battle cry, both of which are buffs that they also share with their Gen 2 counterparts, which we'll discuss in just a minute. Despite their much lower than average stats, both types of Gen 1 can still be effective combat units when using weapons which grant green accuracy die. Their standard loadouts include either an Institute laser pistol, which only costs 3 caps, and the baton, which costs 10 caps, both of which do grant those green die. Gen 1s are actually some of the most affordable units in all of Wasteland Warfare, and because of their low cost, you can load up on these cheap units to swarm and overwhelm your opponent. Affordable as they already are, there is one tactic you can use to make them even more affordable, and that's by using the Synth Relay Grenade. Now, this is a thrown weapon which costs 18 caps, and when the relay grenade is used, it spawns a standard Gen 1 with an Institute laser pistol at the point of impact. Now, that spawned synth is counted as used when it first appears on the board, so it can't take any actions on the same turn that it spawns in. Now, using relay grenades can be a really cheap and effective way to spawn a forward line of Gen 1 synths to really get in the way of your opponent's objective running or any forward charges. Moving away from the basic Gen 1s, we have the more advanced Gen 2 variants. First up is the Synth Patroller. At 77 caps, they're more than twice as expensive as a standard Gen 1, and while they only have 1 physical and 1 energy armor, in my opinion, Patrollers are the bog standard combat unit for the Institute. Now, Gen 1s might be great in swarms, but patrollers have a much higher survivability because of their 8 base hit points. They are far and away better combat units, hitting on 5s in melee and 6s with ranged weapons. Now, patrollers have a range of green with thrown weapons, so they are an option if you want to use these as your synth relay grenade chuckers to expand your force, but for the money, I'm a much bigger fan of the synth trooper. For just a few caps more at 88 total, the synth trooper is a more versatile and robust combat unit compared to the patroller. With 9 hit points, 2 physical and 1 energy armor, they have better survivability stats than the patroller, and they're also slightly better in melee combat, hitting on a strength of 6, and they are one of the few Institute units that can use big guns. Now, they are not amazing objective runners, searching and hacking on 5s, but they're tough units that are worth their caps in my opinion. Troopers have the same chance to hit on 6s with thrown weapons as patrollers do, but troopers have an increased range of blue with thrown weapons, making them a better choice when using synth relay grenades to teleport more Gen 1s onto the battlefield. Last up for the Institute combat units is the dreaded Courser. These Gen 3s are some of the toughest units to go up against in Wasteland Warfare, and unlike the Gen 1s and Gen 2s, none of the synth-specific rules apply to these advanced units, so they can use items like chems, food and clothing, and even power armor. Like other synths, they have immunities to battle cry, but they are not immune to poison. They have 2 physical and 1 energy armor, and while they're not immune to radiation like the lower gen synths, they do have a natural 1 radiation armor. They're tied as the best shooters in the entire faction with an agility of 7, and they hit on 5s in melee combat. When it comes to objective skills, Coursers search on a very high perception of 8 and hack on an intelligence of 5. And while they only have 6 hit points total, they are insanely hard to kill thanks to their Stealth Boy ability. Now, normally a Stealth Boy is only active for 2 turns, but Coursers come equipped with a Stealth Boy which is always active. To successfully attack or engage a Courser, the attacking unit must first make a successful perception test at a -4 penalty. If that perception test fails, then the attack fails. If the test passes, then the attack can be made as normal. Opposing models must also make the same -4 perception test in order to react to a Courser's triggers. Now, for people playing against the Institute, there is a bit of a workaround to avoid this -4 perception test penalty altogether, and that's by using weapons with an area of effect. By targeting an area near the Courser, which puts them within an area effect weapon's blast radius, you can deal blast damage to a Courser without having to make that penalized perception test. This works for weapons like grenades, the missile launcher, and of course flame-based weapons like the flamer or heavy incinerator. The Stealth Boy and their better than average shooting skills make Coursers a top tier combat unit, and their caps cost reflects this at 138 points before even adding equipment. They are one of the most expensive base units in the entire game, but even one Courser can be a force to be reckoned with on the tabletop. Stepping back from combat units for just a second, let's take a look at the different objective runners in the Institute faction, and there are actually 2 pretty unique ones. First up is the Scientist. At just 30 caps, they have a crazy good intelligence, hacking on that intelligence of 8. They both search and shoot on their perception of 5, but they are limited to using pistols when making ranged attacks. They are one of the squishiest units in Fallout Wasteland Warfare with just 4 hit points and no base armor whatsoever, but they do have a move and charge distance of red, so they're actually one of the Institute's more maneuverable units overall. But for me, when it comes to objective runners in the Institute, I have to give it up to the Engineer. While they lose 2 points of intelligence compared to the Scientist, they still have decent objective stats, hitting on all 3 objective skills on an intelligence of 6. This gives them a 55% base chance to succeed on all objective-based skills. They're just one of 4 Institute units with the ability to lockpick, and we'll take a look at the other 3 in just a minute. The Engineer also gets the Clean Room Suit item for free, which gives them 2 extra hit points overall and a 2+1 strong armor against radiation, but it does remove their natural physical armor resistance of 1. Lastly, the engineer also has the repair special ability, which allows them to interact with the synth model to perform a use expertise test. They can then either apply a robot repair kit to the synth model in question, or make an intelligence test to remove 1 point of damage from the model. Effectively, they can act as a medic for your Gen 1 and Gen 2 synths. That wraps up all the standard Institute units, but let's take a look at the 4 different unique models which you can use in your Institute faction forces. First up is A2018, a Gen 2 synth trooper who packs a serious punch when using big guns. With a strength of 7, they are both the faction's best melee unit and the faction's best big gunner. They're the Institute's toughest unit as well, with 9 hit points, 3 physical and 2 energy resistance, and of course they're immune to battlecry, poisons, and radiation. A2018 makes for an okay objective runner in a pinch, scoring on 5s with all 3 objective skills. But A2018 really shines when using big guns because of their quick reload special ability. Once per round, A2018 can make a luck test, and if it's successful, you can automatically reload any slow-firing weapon that they are equipped with. This allows them to make a second attack with the slow-firing weapon if they're successful on that test. And because this unit's standard loadout includes a missile launcher, that means the potential to deal a serious amount of damage has really gone up in your favor. Next up for the uniques are a pair of Institute coursers with a very different range of abilities. First up is Z247. This is the most affordable courser unit at 107 caps, but there are a few disadvantages this unit has compared to the standard courser. First off, 247 hits on 6s with melee, which is 1 point better than the stock courser. They also hit on 6s with ranged weapons and thrown weapons, which is actually a step down by 1 point from the normal courser, but they're limited to pistols when making ranged attacks. They can make for an interesting and unique, if not very expensive, objective running unit because they hit on 6s for all 3 objective skills, and when combined with that stealth boy, they have the ability to move around the table, dodging attacks while looting objective markers in relative safety. For our second unique courser, we have X688. 88 is one of many possible companions for the sole survivor in Fallout 4, and they're also a member of the Institute's Synth Retention Bureau. 88 is essentially an improved version of the standard courser and is the most expensive unit available to the Institute at 152 caps, but in my opinion, he's well worth the cost. Interestingly enough, 88's stat card doesn't have the Institute keyword, but instead labels them as a member of the Survivor faction. Now, this actually isn't a huge deal because, as mentioned earlier, the Institute doesn't have a specific faction special rule, so this distinction only really matters when using 88 in a Survivor force, in which case they will benefit from the Survivor faction's special rule, and I'll put a link to my quick and dirty overview of that rule here. Like other coursers, 88 has an always active stealth boy to help avoid enemy attacks, but they also have the energy shield aura ability, which grants any unit within 88's perception range of green a +1 increase to their energy armor. Now, a couple things to note on this rule. At first is that this is a +1 increase to energy base armor stat, not a +1 strong armor bonus. Second, remember that aura abilities also impact the unit which generates the ability, so this means 88's own base energy armor is actually 2, not 1. And lastly, aura abilities require line of sight to take effect, so if a friendly unit is within green range of 88 but can't see him, then they don't get this buff. Unlike the standard courser, 88 can use big guns, hitting on a strength of 5. He has 1 extra hit point compared to the standard courser, but suffers a -1 penalty to perception-based search tests. 88 can also lockpick, succeeding on an intelligence of 5. Last up for the Institute, we have Conrad Kellogg, a human mercenary with some cybernetic augmentations who's been hired by the Institute to do their dirty work above ground. Kellogg's combat skills are on par with any courser, hitting on 7s with ranged weapons and 5s with melee or thrown weapons. He's also decent when it comes to objective skills, searching on a 7, hacking on a 6, and lockpicking on a 5. Kellogg is one tough customer with 7 hit points, 3 physical, and 2 energy armor. He's actually the most affordable unique unit in the Institute, coming in at just 87 caps, and has a few special rules that make him a go-to for me when building any Institute force. His cybernetic pain inhibitor lets him generate a free yellow or green bonus die token whenever he takes damage, which Kellogg then must use on his next attack. Now, he can only have one token of this kind assigned to him at any one time, so you can't stack multiple tokens. He's immune to battle cry and can make pistol quick attacks, and when using his signature 44 Magnum pistol, Kellogg can also bank critical points. When the crit on Kellogg's pistol is charged, he can unleash an attack which does 3 base damage with 2 black damage die and 1 yellow armor break die. This critical attack also generates a free quick action point that Kellogg can use to either prepare or make a pistol quick action attack. Lastly, his cybernetic limb ability gives him a +2 when performing any climb tests, so this means that his agility for those tests is actually 7, not his base stat of 5. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Better Know a Faction, but leave a comment in the description below and let me know what your favorite Institute units are, and make sure that you're subscribed to WGNR so you don't miss out on our next video. If you really want to support the channel, then consider heading over to my Patreon or Streamlabs pages, where you can get some pretty cool exclusive deals and even some WGNR merchandise if you're so inclined. And of course, you can find WGNR on Discord, Instagram, and Reddit, so make sure you check the description for links to those communities if you want to get involved and join the conversation. Thanks so much again for watching, and make sure you tune in next time when I'm going to be going back to basics and doing a redo of my original Better Know a Faction video, where I'm going to take a look at my favorite faction in the entire game, the Survivors. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned. WGNR will be back.